Our first speaker will be Dr. Joan Vernikos, is the Executive Director, TSHAI at Taksha University. She will be speaking on how sitting kills, moving heals, and solution to modern health hazards. She will explain how with technology, there's an increased sedentary lifestyle, and in turn lead to a broad variety of health disorders. She will discuss the utilization of yoga for the reversal of injury. Please welcome Dr. Joan.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you for coming here after lunch. It's still beating there. And I appreciate the relaxation before speaking. I don't know if that improves or relaxes me too much. But we'll find out, won't we? Presumably this is to go forward and back. Thank you. Sitting kills, moving heals. I wrote a book about that, which is available in the main room. And it is a sobering thought, especially when we are bombarded with advertisements on television and other sources of all kinds of new appliances and technologies designed, and we are told, designed to make our life easier. What does easier mean? It means that you're very quiet after lunch, and then I will have to wake you up. It'll come. It'll come. Anyone dozing, take note. Designed to make your life easier. And what do we mean by that? It means just relax, sit quiet, don't move, don't get out of your chair, your nice, comfortable chair, whatever you're doing. You can use a remote control for everything. You can have a chair, in fact, that lifts you when you want to get out of it. Or takes you up the stairs, so you don't have to use the stairs. And almost all your functions have now been aided by appliances. Like your toothbrush. Once upon a time, you just brushed your teeth that way. We don't even do this little movement anymore. All kinds of things. I'm sure you can make your own list. Just be aware, the saying says, become aware of what you're doing and what you're not doing. That's step one to the solution to the current day problem. And what is the problem? The problem is that in the United States, and the rest of the world is catching up fast, 2 out of 3 people are considered unhealthy by the Center for Disease Control. 2 out of 3 people, 66% and more than that, are considered unhealthy. And that includes everything. It's overweight, obesity, diabetes, heart conditions, depression, rheumatism, very rheumatic disorders, insomnia, smoking, drinking. You just add them up, and it keeps the doctors busy and the pharmaceutical industry happy. But you can be happy and relax and enjoy life. And it is very important to realize that not only does the United States healthcare cost more than anywhere else in the world, we spend more on healthcare than any other country, and we still have this humongous health problem. And we're living longer, so they tell us. Medical technology has made it possible for us to live longer. But the point is, do we want to live longer if we're not well? And personally, I find that I want to be healthy till I drop dead. How about you? You may differ in your expectations of life, but I personally don't want to become a vegetable, lose my independence. So, my background was in stress, how the brain regulates the stress response. That's where I started out. But I was hired very early on by NASA. And I was hired by NASA because they were concerned that putting a human on top of a rocket was going to be a stressful experience. And it turned out, the first time we actually measured stress hormones in astronauts, which was in 1966, with Gemini 7, 14 days in flight. Yes, they were anxious before flying. Yes, they had a huge response after landing. But during the flight, in fact, stress hormone levels were suppressed below the normal. And scratched my head and thought, this is the end of a wonderful career. And I had to turn to other things for a while, until more recently, when the non-military, younger population of astronauts began to be selected, the scientists and the astronomers and the engineers and people, ordinary people like that, when stress levels moved higher and higher and higher, and not only during flight, but interestingly, when one astronaut came down with shingles 2 days before liftoff, it suddenly occurred to people that even the training and the expectation of being launched was a stressful experience. So I got busy again. Let me just walk you through a few ideas. Am I doing something wrong?
No, right.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to make sure that you can see. Do I sit there? Okay. This is one of our ancestors. And it's really to remind us that we today have the same genes as our ancestors. Our genetic makeup has not changed, but the demands on that genetic makeup have changed. And although his concern was to run away from the lion or climb up a tree in a hurry or escape fire that was destroying his home, and we're an issue of survival. Our kind of survival is different, and our challenges are different. But they're challenges nevertheless. And we use the same genetic makeup to respond to these challenges that we recognize as a question of survival. What it really demonstrates, though, is that today we sit and we use the same genes and expose them to this new condition of being sedentary. I said I worked for the space program, and my awareness of the problem really came from doing research for astronauts who go into space. And what happens in space is that we have for the first time the ability to determine how the gravity that surrounds us, that we live in and take for granted, or we think of as the enemy that drags us down towards the center of the Earth, how that affects our health, wellness, and emotions. And it expresses itself in several ways. The absence or the removal or the reduction of exposure to gravity, in that environment, you have mass but no weight. Isn't that lovely? You don't weigh anything. There is no up or down, so we have no sense of direction or acceleration, which is a function of gravity. And exercise, we know in the early days it was certainly considered that it is a state of relative inactivity. So if you want to expose, if you want to expose children to total inactivity, you send them up in space. Otherwise, I don't know how to do it. In fact, so the astronauts are encouraged to exercise. Exercise was the solution for everything, is supposed to be the solution for everything. And don't get me wrong, I'm not against exercise. It has a role to play, but it's not the beginning and the end of our wellness. Hours of exercise, up to 4 hours a day, under difficult circumstances. You see that the astronaut is secured by bungee cords or by shoulder pads that hold them down. But otherwise, they would float up into what is the ceiling. Helps, but does not prevent the deleterious changes that happen in space. And in fact, when they come back into the field of gravity and are pulled down by gravity again, their body has become what we call deconditioned by being in space in microgravity. And suddenly, their blood is drawn down to their feet, away from their head, and they pass out. 50% of the male and 100% of the female astronauts faint on standing when they return from space. We used to think only Russians did that. It's amazing. So one of the ways we found that we had to explore on the ground was to develop on the ground models that mimic or induce the kind of changes we saw in space. And the Russians and the German scientists were ahead of us, and they figured out that when I'm standing here, gravity is pulling at its maximum from head to toe, because it's pulling straight down to the center of the Earth. If I lie down, it's only pulling across my chest. It's called G sub x, as opposed to G sub z, if you want to be exact nomenclature. That reduces the influence of gravity. It doesn't take it away, but it reduces the influence of the pull of gravity on the whole body. And we use that model to study what happens, perhaps in space, and how we can prevent it. It went one step further. The Russians, in fact, because the cosmonauts came back and complained that when they returned, they couldn't get a good night's sleep because they felt like they were slipping off the end of the bed. Interesting that. And the scientists thought, that must be closer to what it's like being in space. So they changed the model from being horizontally in bed, as we're used to be, most of us anyway, to slightly head down. First they went 30 degrees head down, but it wasn't necessary. 5 to 6 degrees head down is quite adequate. So if you want to practice that, go home, get some phone books, raise the foot of your bed by about 15 inches, and you know exactly how an astronaut feels when he first goes into space. The blood rushes to the head and the chest, and you adjust to that, just as when you go on your headstand. You adjust to it in a very little time. So we used this model, and interestingly, we did see the same changes that we saw in astronauts. And this is the way the subjects, the volunteers, saw themselves. 15 minutes? She talked. I was counting. Before and after, bed rest saw themselves as aging. And so we started exploring the similarities between living, sitting, lying down on Earth reducing the influence of gravity, and what astronauts experience. And we now know with 6 months in space that you accelerate the loss of bone, the loss of muscle, 10 times faster than you do here on the ground. What can you do? You can, in fact, use gravity more. You can sit less. One of the things we learned from space is that it is not so much a question of the hours of sitting, which are important, as the hours of uninterrupted sitting. That what the body recognizes is an on-off switch. In other words, intermittent change. That is what stimulates and tunes the systems of the body. And the posture change, the change in posture from lying down to standing up, from sitting down to standing up, is what is the stimulus that triggers and tunes the various systems of the body. The system that regulates blood pressure, that is in the baroreflex receptors, the systems in the bone and the muscle throughout the body. So what you can do is replace that, not with 30 minutes of exercise once a day, but throughout the day with movement that uses gravity. And you use gravity by jumping on the trampoline up to 4.5 times gravity, riding on a roller coaster, which increases the level of gravity, by gardening. This is an 87-year-old man who was for 2 years in a wheelchair, and by intermittent standing every 20 minutes, within 3 months was up and about and gardening. And he's not the only case. We no longer do the things our parents, grandparents, and some parts of the world still do. We have a washing machine. We don't go to the river to wash. I like my washing machine. It's wonderful. But I have deprived myself of using gravity by using my appliance. I no longer stand up straight and carry something on my head. We used to at school have a book on our heads to walk. I don't think they do that these days. Or we pray. And the prayers very often include gravity-using motions. Very much in the Muslim religion, but all of the religions include like a rocking motion, a kneeling motion. Changing posture is very much part of all kinds of religions. These movements, all day, every day, that our parents and grandparents used to do, and that we need to restore into our lives, form the foundation of our health and wellness. By all means, go to the gym and do a bit of exercise if that's what you do and you feel good about it. But if you get injured, or if you can't for some reason go to the gym, this is what you need. It's called now in the parlance non-exercise activities, NEAT, in fact, non-exercise thermogenic activities. And it is recognized that these activities that you can do anywhere, all the time, every day, including weekends, are what forms the foundation of your health and fitness. And yes, you can add more activity and exercise until you're a peak athlete, and then it's detrimental. Gravity pulls in one direction only. And what do you do about it? Let me give you an example. Stand up. Okay. You know what I saw? What do you think I saw as you stood up? I saw people leaning on their knees. Fortunately, there aren't any armrests. Some rolled around to get up. I want you to sit down. Roll. Stand up and sit down as slowly as you possibly can without any support. Very good. You're getting there. Many of you, there you go. Now you have an advantage. And the advantage is that you are using gravity all day long in your yoga practice. It took us how many centuries to send people into space to discover that gravity has that effect? It took thousands of years ago for the yogis of the time to describe nature's movement all around us, which is totally gravity dependent, to maintain health and wellness. Now I want you to sit down as slowly as you possibly can. We've got a competition here. There's a prize. But it is amazing, you're really very good. You got he squats too. Very good. You can chant it your life. The solution is free, it's odorless, it's tasteless, it is available to everyone. The most important thing is that you become aware of what you're doing, aware of how you can prevent the changes that are happening. Live long and prosper. Thank you.
Dr. Joan. Our next speaker will be Dr. Naveen Visweswaraiah, who is an associate professor at Vyasa, India, and co-principal investigator, ICMR. He will be discussing the psychophysiology of meditation on the syllable Om. In this presentation, the studies on meditation on the syllable Om will be detailed to show how Om can be termed as a state of alert full rest.
Just wanted to class.
Good afternoon to all. This is a kind of a very comprehensive overview of what we've been doing for over 15 years. Much of this work was started by Dr. Shirley Tellis, with whom a lot of you are very familiar, while she was in MHANS pursuing her MPhil PhD, and then I pursued my doctorate work also on psychophysiology of meditation, particularly on Om. And then we have Center for Advanced Research from Indian Council of Medical Research, kind of a contemporary body of like NIH here, also funds us to do the research on meditation in cerebral form. So it's kind of like some, I think I should confess. So this is about 20, close to 20 odd papers summarized, and try and do it in 15 minutes. And it's good to have question and answers, so I choose to skip quite a few slides. Bear with me. This is an overview. These are the headings under which I thought I'd speak. First 2-3 subheadings are important for those of you who are not so familiar with this. First 3 slides, I'm sure all of you are familiar with the basics of yoga. For just those of you who are not familiar, particularly in this part of the world, much of the derived yoga practices that are available, which are specific to different schools, are body-based, and there are a big range of schools, gurus even from India, who focus only on breath-based practices, and some straight away talk of meditation directly with no body breath preparatory activities, and of course people talk of soul or spirit-based activities. Ashtanga yoga really goes along this sequence from gross to subtle, and I don't see any new age or derived yoga school which follows this classical prescription. Again, these are the 2 fundamental concepts for us to understand where we actually fit in meditation. The concept of Panchakosha was mentioned by Dr. Nagendraji this morning, and the interesting thing is yoga gives us techniques to cater or to harness each of these koshas. Talking of syllable Om, this is mentioned in Mandukya Upanishad, one of the classical texts, and these are the 3 letters used or syllable used and forms Om. And like this morning, somebody was asking about the Sanskrit chants used in Kirtan Kriya. This is the significance of Om in its subsets and together. Now, for those of us, if you want to define meditation, to me, these two are very, very important, and thought mentioning it here. One, of course, it's a state of reasoning, reflection, bliss, and pure sense of being. So that is in essence, what meditation is. And what is interesting for us as researchers, it's a state where there is a simultaneous reduction of distractions. What was mentioned this morning as a default mode network or resting state, or what we call random thinking, and to a state of enhanced focused awareness, not focused thinking. Now, if you have to really illustrate this into subsets, two of these states are mentioned in Bhagavad Gita, and two of these are mentioned in Patanjali Yoga Sutras. Chanchalata is a state of random thinking, where we have disjointed thoughts, and ekagrata, focusing, that we are all familiar with, scholastic focusing or any learning experience. Dharana is a meditative focusing, and dhyana is meditative defocusing. Now, what I would like to mention here, while describing these states, these are the points that we need to consider. Direction of thoughts, randomness to ekagrata, that then it gets unidirectional. Number of thoughts remain until here, then it starts to reduce drastically. Intensity shown here, and the thickness of the arrows. So you kind of being aware of, and here we are more participatory in nature. And intermittent state of no thought. If you were to have this arrow continuously, number of them over a period of time, there's this periods in between this single thought, which is supposedly the silence. Now, there are a number of meditation techniques available today from different cultures and civilizations. Each of this model will help us. In fact, it did help us while classifying meditation techniques that we wanted to study. Most of them fall in between these two phases, sub-phases. There are dharana type of meditation and dhyana type of meditation. And there is a review by contemporary psychologists today, what they call focused attention and open monitoring. Could be parallel to what is this states prescribed in Pathophysiology. For those of you who are interested, I just thought I'd put this. Very clear, lucid description of what these four states are. Chanchalata and ekagrata, and of course dharana and dhyana. So I would get into it later on if you have time. Key features of Om meditation, particularly since we are talking about it. Going by that classification, this is a dhyana type of meditation. Although it's a continuum, the act of meditation is a continuum from chanchalata to dhyana, but the end state, as we call, in this case is dhyana, not dharana. There are meditation techniques where we refer to again as focused attention, would stop at dharana, no, not in dhyana. So in that classification, I would rather put this as open monitoring. So there is a defocusing component as an end state, which is again one of the important features to note. And there is a distinct dharana phase. In this case, unlike other techniques, either some of them go directly to the focusing state or stop at focusing state. Here you do have a dharana when you chant Om meditation, or to get into Om meditation, where there is a dharana component with loud chanting, and then the mental chanting, which takes you to the dhyana phase. And then recognition and experience of single thought as Om per se. And then, of course, the emphasis is on intermittent no thought state. Now, methods of investigation, we virtually used large number of variables and domains of variables. But what I would like to highlight here is aspects of the study. Most of you are familiar with meditation literature would know that all of these or some of these always used. Traditionally, autonomic and respiratory variables, and then EEG were used. And in later years, evoked potential is now, in the last 10 years, neuroimaging. Of course, subjective experience is very important to correlate the findings from all of this. As I said, aspects of study, these are some of the key features that we need to consider. Changes across states of meditation is the this is the first time that we had an opportunity to split a state of wakeful consciousness into meditative state and non-meditative state. And we have two substates after that. And then of course typically this is the design that everyone uses. But what we started to use to reduce confounding variables is self as control. That's the best for meditation research that we have found out in these 2 decades. Control studies, of course, you have meditators and non-meditators. There's a whole lot of issues related to confounding variables between the 2 groups would be very, very different. Changes across repeat sessions. Now, this is something that we look for because this is a distinct state of consciousness and we want to see consistent repeat changes which are consistent across sessions. Then impact of experience, a whole lot of studies traditionally looked at experienced meditators and off-late. People are looking at naive meditators. And this is a very tricky, and I don't think we still have a very conclusive answer. Meditation is such a subjective act. We really don't have an objective marker to really define that somebody's, they're sitting closed eyes, are they really having a strategy of a negative connotation or a meditative connotation. Now, but nevertheless, there are attempts to look at markers of act of meditation. The first one came in 1984, published in Somatic Medicine from TM Group, where these are the, of course, some different subjects superimposed. You have the breath suspension of the control group here, and this is the of the meditators. So they saw of the 11 subjects, where when there's an advanced program called TM Siddhi program, where people are asked to have a soul consciousness as I described for meditation on cerebral Om, as an intermittent period of silence. And this was correlated with a sustained breath suspension, and this was statistically significant. So that was a marker that they interpreted as a no-thought state. In 1992, well before we really established laboratory in Vyasa, Dr. Shirley, with her mentor in Nimhans, had this trace taken, where people were supposedly capable of having a single thought and no thought state. And this is how the respiratory traces looked. And of course, this is similar to what TM found much earlier. Now, what we have found, we have studied at least 3 types of meditation techniques, that is meditation on cerebral Om and Brahma Kumari's Raja Yoga meditation, which is more like focused attention on set of thoughts about the content of meditation, and then of course something which is like mindfulness in India called Vipassana meditation. Now across these 3, we did find consistent markers for Om and Brahma Kumaris in terms of heart rate and respiratory rate changes. Heart rate incidentally in Brahma Kumaris increases during meditation because, as I said, it's more a state of focused attention and there is mental engagement during, and then of course the post state is a lot more relaxing. Whereas in meditation on Om, talking of Om, we have a decrease in heart rate and respiratory rate. Now this is something that we had to look inter-subject and intra-subject. When you repeat the same meditator many times, does it repeat? And can you really see the similar changes in heart rate and respiratory rate? And when you have across different sub-meditators, do you really find this range of reduction? The answer is yes. Now let's look at the changes in these 2 subsections. Changes related to the end state. We simply ask somebody to meditate on cerebral Om, and we compare that either with non-meditation session of the same subject, or compared it with pre or post of the state of that session. And the other one is the phases of meditation, like I described earlier, across 4 states: Chanchalata, Ekagrita, Dhyana. We would see that in 3 subsets, a bunch of studies into each one of them. Meditation on Om alone, where we just had meditators meditating on cerebral Om, and we did not have any control session. And then here, after relaxation, response was a lot more prevalent and available. The results were available to us. We used one as control, and then we looked at experienced and naive. Quickly, since we have running short of time, so to use next 5 minutes, meditation alone, this is similar to TM, Robert Keith Wallace study, where it was a state of hypoarousal, whereas, look at, skipping that, now this is some of the graphs of autonomic variables where you see the changes across meditation on Om and on one and non-targeted thinking, which is random thinking. Now there's not much changes here, whereas when you see heart rate, there's a reduction during, and breath rate seems to reduce more when somebody is chanting one. So there is a classical relaxation can happen regardless of the content of meditation or the content of the word that we repeat, but the conscious drive of relaxation happens with the awareness of the content of the mantra or the content of meditation. And of course, now unlike Wallace study where there is a unilateral changes, here we had seen selective changes where some of the components of autonomic variables, or autonomic and respiratory variables, would show a sign of activation. So here you see reduction in skin resistance, which means a thread of enhanced awareness. So as you see here, there are 4 markers, and you see one of it, which is kind of in isolation would be referred to as a sign of arousal, whereas in conjunction with these 3, then you would want to interpret it as a state of alertful rest, as opposed to a blanket statement of a state of hypoarousal. Now, what did we find? We didn't look at autonomic variables here. I would like to ask you to focus here. These are the amplitudes of the waves, which each one corresponds to different parts of the brain along the sensory tract. This is the naive, and this is the experienced. So the amplitude denotes the number of neurons recruited. So the amplitude of change, the magnitude of change in the same area, part of the brain, is more significant across time period with experience. So now, very briefly, probably in 3 minutes, phases of meditation. Now, we were talking of dharana and dhyana type. Now, if dhyana, as we saw in earlier slides, a state of alertful rest. So you see, when compared to Brahma Kumaris, all the changes you see in Om right here. Whereas for Brahma Kumaris, you see at the dharana. So even if you instruct them, orient them to the phase for dhyana, you really don't see much changes, which is classically known across studies for Brahma Kumaris. So similarly, this is a passing phase here. You see all the changes here. So it's also useful for us to categorize the kind of meditation, and then there are implications on training. Again, evoke potential similar. So all the changes is at the end state in dhyana, and again for Brahma Kumaris it's at dharana, conspicuously known, not even a single marker changing here in both. So that shows that we did have good meditators complying to the traditional prescription of what those meditations were. As we said earlier, Chanchalata Ekagrata Parana Dhyana. Again, in this case we are talking of meditation on cerebral Om. So all the changes were seen here in the phase of dhyana as opposed to the other 3. Meditation, we saw the brain stem across the neural axis, mid latency, and then there's long latency. So this is look at the brain stem changes, the thalamic changes, primary cortex, and the association phase. So what did we see? So let me go to the summary slide. So we have, this is in terms of time taken for a sensory input or a stimulus to be transmitted across the sensory tract. So the less time taken for until the primary auditory cortex. The secondary or association cortex and beyond, there is a delayed response. Probably this can be correlated with the other studies that we've been seeing, and where we've started to see inhibition, cortical inhibition. We have the results of fMRI scans when people are switching across these 4 states, like we had the 4 states in the morning with Kit and Kriya. So here we have those 4 classical states of wakeful consciousness, and we see in dharana the substrates which are traditionally known in meditation research for selective attention. And in dhyana, this is something very interesting. We are really in the process of counter-checking with multiple research groups, where we see subparticle white matter activation. Now that is interpreted as when there is an adjoining gray matter inhibition is there, then you see the activation of white matter. So that means this supports our electrophysiological observation of particle inhibition. Now, so it's the same thing. Now, in summary, so what is meditation on cerebral bone? Can be understood or defined as a state of alertful rest, not a state of hypo-arousal, which is a dhyana type of meditation, by content, it's not focused attention. Of course, we have more enhanced and accurate by virtue of the time taken and the number of neurons recruited for, in this case, auditory sensory perception. And we had a number of cognitive tasks given to these meditators on judgment and plan, which are higher brain functions attributed to frontal lobe. And those enhanced by improved task performance. And now we are doing that while people are in the scanner and simultaneously recording high density EEG of about 128 channels. So now we will know, unlike all of these studies which are done in baseline, just in meditation per se, now we will have these meditators performing these cognitive tasks, and we would have their fMRI, which is, and then electrophysiology, EEG data together, and that will be interesting. Probably in the next meeting we'll have those results. Some of the popular mentioned here. Now this is something very interesting. I thought someone here, there's also an acknowledgement. All the entire lab is supported by this funding agency of Government of India. Now we have these cognitive tasks in these meditators. It's being supported by Department of Science and Technology. Government of India has 5-year blocks. The first heavily funded information technology, then nanotechnology, then biotechnology. Interestingly, now cognitive neuroscience, which is why probably there's some funding for looking at depression and dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, so on and so forth. So it's a good time for us to do good quality meditation research. This is our team for surely tell us heads these 2 major grants. End with this quote: while in the midst of daily life, Sadhguru echoed the same thing, yet detached. So that's the highest order of meditation or karma yoga. With the practice of yoga, one can ever live in blissful happiness. So we really don't have to sit or stay for a meditation. We can convert our wakeful consciousness into meditative consciousness.
Starting to study on yoga therapy for irritable bowel syndrome. He'll be discussing the clinical study that is being undertaken for effective integrated management of IBS through yoga.
Good afternoon. It's indeed a great pleasure to share with some of our work. I thank the organizers for putting wonderful quality work here. Quality is not an accident. It's a concerted effort involved. I'm very thankful and the warm hospitality. This work, I come from a modern science guy. I've been 30 years of working in modern science. 2 years back, I had my personal experience, downfall of physical health, that led to get into yoga. Phenomenally, like many of us shared was 2 days, the personal experience that was practiced all. But the challenge is, how do you take these personal experiences to make it more acceptable when practitioners, modern clinicians? I've been involved with a lot of clinical trials and other things. Whenever you talk about yoga, they always subjective and it's not going to work and all kind of thing. Then people like me, coming from modern science, we always want to have an objective, evidence-based, quantified data. Dr. Naveen pointed out some of the challenges with regards to meditation. That is, sometimes things cannot be quantified, so it changes. But there are other cases but there's a limitation of the technology we have maybe. But there are other cases you can quantify some of the things which Dr. Khalsa has pointed out yesterday very candidly. And that is the reason what we thought, why can't we take some studies which we can quantify and then demonstrate whether indeed it's happening. Some of this preliminary work has been done in SPSO for many years, but still, when recently Guruji was visiting my institution, still people asked, looking at the publications and the data, it's not quite convincing. We have to be self-critical of our work. And that is what led to this better undertaking for me. I'm a full-time scientist. I do as a enjoyment and tremendously enjoy. I wish maybe down the line I would be involved 100% from my own research. That's why I go to bed sometime 1 o'clock and then get up 4 o'clock. My night time is for this, daytime for my other work. This work would not be possible. I would say this LA Vyasa is a whole team. The Vyasa is a chapter of, LA is a chapter of SVSA, and we are like a Houston center. But this is the first study. If you remember, the study which they started in MD Anderson, this collaborative study funded by NIH to MD Anderson. Then we thought, why can't we the sponsor of a study and we conduct the study? And blessingly, this is what happened in a collaboration with the White Memorial Hospital in Los Angeles. This is a study that we're going to undertake. First, let me acknowledge, first I may run out of time. It would not be possible without clinicians' cooperation. We have to convince the clinician cooperation, come in partnership with us. That's key. If we go through clinical study. And also we have a wonderful trained committee after having 2 kids in college. The yoga therapist and researcher. Without her, I would not have start connecting this very hard. I would give a strong credit to her, and also wonderful students. She's going to get this work done, and also get a PhD. That's what you're hoping for. I also want to thank all the members of the team for their support. We cannot even conduct this. So the project takes a lot of manpower. And then our leadership, Chakrabani, I like to recognize our team is sitting here. Chakrabani, Babu Gandhi, Vikboy Patel, they all have leadership for us. And also Nagendra and the doctor, our logistic for conducting the study. And it would have been possible without Pathophysiology support. No money, no mission. I kind of characterize the content, planned out the topics where I first defined what is the Irritable Bowel syndrome. I just touch upon what is the prevalence and then classification. Then I'll touch upon what the physiotherapy. If you look at Irritable Bowel syndrome, it's a disability. Look at here, this is the status you go through. You cannot express yourself, you are having this disease, you are confined in many cases. I'm sorry, yes. There is a situation, grave situation. And if you look at a simple definition, what's really happening with the IBS is basically an abnormality in the intestinal muscle contraction because somebody is squeezing your intestine. If you look at more so in detail, it is a disorder of common condition of the digestive system. It is not a disease. It's a group of, when you call it syndrome means comprises symptoms and signs that occur together in a chronic and episodic way. It comes and goes sometimes. You may not even realize you have this disease. And then causes bouts of, what are the characteristics? Stomach cramps, bloating, flatulence and gas, and then diarrhea and the constipation. What are the incidences? Affects as many as 1 in 5 Americans, making it one of the most common ailments diagnosed. I want to focus here what's happening in the US. Also, it's more common in women than men, or 2 to 1. In about 50% of the population, it strikes before the age of 35. And if you look at classification, it's a kind of very difficult to classify. It's again a little bit subjective here, but they classify it as 4 different cases. One is IBS with constipation, diarrhea, and you have to look into the sub-categorization. What is the characteristic of each category? And then it's all mixed type also with the diarrhea and the constipation of urine. And also uncyclic category, so less than 25% of any of the situation like whether hard or not stools or loose or watery stools in case of diarrhea. If you look at pathophysiology, what is it's a very normal GI, it's a GI motility altered, intestinal secretion, and then visceral sensitivity. It's basically a functional abnormality. If you look into the morphologically, they are normal. The color is normal. But it is functional changes that is what leads to this disease. And if it has a strong neural connection, as we have been talking in many of the talks here, all the three involve biductal interaction with the brain gut axis, which links the brain and the spinal cord, the central nervous system, with the enteric nervous system, which I call it as a mini brain. You can see the gut level. When you have some anger, something like that, you feel it here. There is a two brain system you have to recognize when you want to talk about this disease. I just want to touch upon it more. If you have a stress, for example, mood disturbance, stress, anxiety, depression, that lead to central nervous system change and autonomic nervous system affecting enteric nervous system, which connects with the smooth muscle cell. It's basically smooth muscle cell disease here, and that's what it happens. And again, it's a triangle. Actually, I'll show you here. One other thing, there are many things happen during the neural brain network involves from neurotransmitters and neuromodulators. The particular one which heavily involved people associated with is serotonin. The serotonin is basically involved in hostility, anger, and aggressive behavior. And more so, the serotonin which is produced and stored mainly in the gut, 90%, has been believed to play a primary role in the development of symptoms. The modern medicine, what they try to do when they identify like that, oh, let us target the serotonin. And that is what they try to target the two different receptors here, but with some antagonist or agonist. But still, it doesn't work. The disease doesn't target it. What I'm trying to allude here is modern medicine goes into reductionist approach and trying to identify something, aha, this we can fix this one, everything can be solved. That is not the case. If you add further dimension to this irritable bowel syndrome, like in the earlier mentioned, you are involved with the muscular, nervous, and immune, which immunology is one of the favorite field I've been working for 30 years. You cause inflammations, and inflammation can lead to. And also people think there is a bacterial association. If you have bacterial infection, that can also go. And also, if you take a gluten causes celiac disease, and that can also lead to IBS. And I try to put together this slide show that you have a food sensitivity, imbalance in flora that I talked about, the other factor, environment, and then endometrius. So there are so many other things can lead to IBS. The conventional treatment, just to make a statement here, they try to change it. If you have a problem, they say change the diet, and then nutrition, medication, probiotics, even psychotherapy, antidepressant, many things they prescribe. But still, the problem, if you look into the people who seek the alternative approaches, tremendous. Many great number of people they seek alternative medicine because they don't get any benefit from the modern medicine. Then what are the other alternative medicine people try? Exercise, acupuncture, hypnosis, and yoga. If you go and click PubMed, in fact I do have it. If you click, why I'm stressing here is importance of research is, if you click in PubMed, IBS and TAM, you only get 11 papers. And I'm not talking about the quality of the paper, I'm just talking about the number here. IBS in alternative and complementary medical therapy, there are 29 of them. IBS in yoga, only 7. IBS and hypnosis, 53 papers. And IBS and antidepressant, 177 papers. I think what they put. Even the hypnosis, the problem with the hypnosis, you cannot practice it very easily. It's very difficult. But yoga, you can do it. I've been doing that for 2 years. Phenomenal. Once you learn it, it's become part of you. That's what I want to try to highlight. There are two aspects of it. Touch upon exercise and yoga. I'll touch what is the current status. Then I'll allude you with our present work. There is one study which has been done recently in 2010. They looked at the exercise and how that can modulate IBS. Unfortunately, most clinical trials have been of poor quality. That's what I'm trying to underline here. The efficacy of these therapies have not been adequately elucidated, even though systematic reviews and meta-analysis. There is also general lack of understanding of the mechanism of action. This is another key problem. Currently, insufficient evidence exists to support the use of traditional Chinese medicine, acupuncture, meditation, and reflexology for the treatment of IBS. That is the biggest challenge there. Then, the exercise, there is a recent study, this is 2011. 102 patients, only 75 completed. But this study, they say exercise can improve 51 points versus control with 5 points in terms of symptom scores. But the limitation of the study is the result with quality of life, anxiety and depression and fatigue that are required to have sustained benefit were not significantly changed, which in my mind you can alter. The study mentioned that diary was checked but does not provide average time of physical exercise and type of exercise. But if you look at here one point, then whosoever is conducting the physiotherapy, they give an instruction on the phone. How do you know that how much they are doing? And the question arises, if IBS patient can do, how do you exercise given their history? It's a strenuous exercise. That is a problem. I'm trying to pose some problems here. Then this is a study on yoga, which on adults. It's a very small number of patients they've been used in this study. Male adults, most adult they've used. In fact, it's equivalent in women. And yoga group 9, control group 12. Yoga intervention for 12 postures and right nostril breathing twice a day for 2 months. Control group and they have lopromat, that's for diarrhea, mostly they use the diarrhea patients. This is the first randomized trial using a yoga as an intervention to improve the symptoms of IBS. Establish a good standard for future study, that's all I can say from this study. Limitation is monitoring of the yoga session was not done, no journal maintenance. We do not know whether people practice. And then diet was not mentioned, quality of life was not measured, study limited to male population even though prevalence is 2:1 to men. That led to designing the trial which I will planning to do. Basically, we followed the IOIT, which Dr. Naratana has elegantly alluded yesterday and even today. We took their guidance. Our hypothesis was IOIT can influence at physical level, physiological factors, but also psychological factors. So all can make it. But IBS, if you talk about all the 3 things, changes in these 3 things can affect the IBS, result of IBS. We thought we should look into those factors. We have a subject design and intervention and outcome measures. And then we selected a population of for subjects allowing 40% active attention rate and a sample size of 108. We have 3 groups here, 36 in yoga group, 36 in combination group, and 36 in weight-resistant control group we have planned. And then we have a inclusion criteria. We follow the round 3 criteria. That's a standard criteria we follow. For lack of time, I'm not going to go over everything. And then not enrolled in any other alternative medical program, not practiced yoga in the last 6 months, able to maintain a journal for dietary intake, and then do the practice. And we eliminate some of the people who has physical disability to yoga, pregnancy, and also mental disability to yoga. And then there are 3 measures. We have 12 weeks yoga intervention, of both here yoga alone, yoga plus conventional treatment, whatever the treatment they are taking, they can go ahead. Here they go through conventional treatment, then we put them back in yoga group after a period of 12 weeks. And then we are planning to do the analysis baseline, 6 weeks and 12 weeks. That is at the end of the plan. And existing treatment, this is what weight-resistant group I mentioned here. And they will go through diet counseling, maintain a daily dietary intake journal. After 3 months, as I mentioned, they will be back from yoga group. Basically, we following just around here. There's 60 minutes of yoga each practice under the guidance of the yoga instructor therapist. Weekly thrice for 12 weeks. Your counseling include diet and happiness analysis, happy assembly for an hour. In case of observed necessity, conventional treatment will be used for yoga only group, and the patient will be moved to the combination group. We have to have a room there. And then this is a structure we have created. 1 hour breathing, it's a relaxation technique, counseling. I don't need to go through all the thing. And it's a basic workout we have from the SVSR. But the important thing is we need to make sure or not creating one module with fit everybody. We have to, because the two kind of diseases we have, diarrhea and constipation, then we have to kind of cognizant about there are certain things can be done by diarrhea, cannot be done with constipation. And therein more abdominal twisting asanas for involved with the constipation module to activate digestive power. Uddiyana Bandha and Agnisara are also performed to activate digestive. Diarrhea module, more abdominal stretching asanas to soothe the digestive tract. Uddiyana Bandha and then Agnisara to be avoided. And then meditation, pranayama, there also. And then we are planning to do the bowel symptom score and IBS quality of life. That's our primary objective measures. The secondary objectives are BMI, physical flexibility, autonomic function, state and anxiety. And then body mass index we do, and then the range of motions from hip, front and hip and shoulder, using like the flexibility and other measures. In terms of physiological evaluation, we have a series of things which Dr. Naveen talked about, looking at even heart rate variability and also blood pressure. That's a very key component. I'll be done in a few more slides. We look at what autonomic function is, 2 testing and also 4 tests which involve for measuring the 2 tests for sympathetic reactivity, that is mental arithmetic math as well as a hand grip test. And also for parasympathetic, we do the heart rate variability at 30, 15 upright posture. And also heart rate variability in response to deep breathing, which again we are looked at here. That's what we are planning to do. And then for anxiety evaluation, we are going to use the state track anxiety inventory that's published in this is standard questionnaire we are going to involve. And also quality of life evaluation, we use IBS, quality of life, developed by Patrick et al. In 1998. And we also going to look at other parameters like age, gender, education, economic status, because some of the population is going to be Hispanic populations. That's a very important component. And that is what we are planning to do, and then the trial is going to be started in, we have everything in place, IRB has approved, we have put in all the logistics, November 1st week, we are planning to recruit patients really lined up, and that is what I can share with you. I'm sorry, maybe next meeting, I'll be in a position to share some of the preliminary findings. And what are the yoga can benefit you here it is, first the practice can bring, this is key, which have been time and again stressed by many speakers here, and bring awareness that something is out of balance. Then the asanas, pranayama, meditation, etc. become specific tools to bring the system into balance. That is what we need to achieve if we want to find a cure, not just meditations or quick fix or with the reductionist approach to solve issues. And if you don't do it, this is what happens. I divorced him after I discovered that when I eat alone, I did not get indigestion. That is again stressful. This is what I need to focus here. I want to find me implanting my cabbages, but caring little for it and much more for it, give my imperfect God. And why I share this one with you is, we all come up with, even Dr. Naveen pointed out at the beginning, we all come up with the goodness in us, everything. What we accumulate is the task. If you remove the task, the goodness you don't need, it's revealed itself. And that is what I would like to share with you. If you have any questions, please. Thank you.
Is it just at one center or multiple centers?
This is a one-center study. What we are trying to, that's a good question, because we want to have none of this, we have SVS centers here, no center has really put together a study. We all do as a personal basis. I was listening to Ashwini and other people. We do at the personal level, therapy, technique, but we case study. Even the case study, in fact, I published a case study following one patient for 8 years. I published a paper in leukemia research in some other different contexts. But we need to methodically follow. Quality is important. Not just, okay, I did this person feeling better. We have done that. It's a time to put together a systematic program. That is what I'm trying to make a case here. And who can do? We have to bring in people, scientists. If scientists have to do, well, not because I'm a scientist, I'm speaking for them. In order to clinician, we take it to the clinician. Clinicians should speak like Dr. Dev Shankar can tell. He's a clinician, he can speak to the clinician, that's true. But if you go with the evidences, it's going to speak for itself.
Last but not least, we need the content.
Yes, no money, no mission. Dr. Khalsa pointed out beautifully yesterday. And that is why I tell you, this is a community effort, a small community level, with giving time and energy to you all doing giving your personal time, not paid or anything. And that we have to start something. Then once you so small steady, sure, then we can get money. Without doing that, you keep asking, oh, yoga works, we know that, it's been at 5,000 years, why it's still the same step? And we have, I think, if you put our will, there is a money will come. It need to happen here. That's all I can say. But it has to happen on a large scale. We are very, not in a very boasting ourselves, proud to say that it's the #1 trial putting in America. We have to, if you want to take it to the American audience, we cannot take SPSR data and show them to do that. Okay, MD Anderson could do it, one center. We have to make it like a banyan tree. We have to make branches, empowering, and many centers have to do like MD Anderson. And then only we are going to have a step.
The man who loved yoga now gave $15 million to University of Virginia.
See?
Yeah. So
We have to know how to tap into it.
How
Thank you,
funding
Dr.
agencies together. Thank you so much.
So thank you. Our next speaker will be Dr. Smita Visweswaraiah, who is a yoga therapist, Vyasa, Houston, will be presenting yoga therapy for breast cancer patients. The result of research examined the effects of yoga in specific psychological parameters in women with breast cancer undergoing radiotherapy will be presented. Vyasa Bangalore research will be briefly presented, and research at MD Anderson will be elaborated.
Is Smita here? You've exchanged emails, but
Namaste everybody. Welcome to this presentation on breast cancer. And firstly, I would like to acknowledge Vyasa Bangalore, Dr. Nagaratna, Dr. Nagenka, Dr. Shirley, Dr. Bowel and team, as well as Dr. Lorenzo Cohen and his team from MD Anderson for giving me an opportunity to present their work here today. A little bit of background about the research with breast cancer. As cancer is becoming one of the major killers around the world, in many countries, many leading countries, Vyasa Bangalore did a lot of homework back, and the first randomized trials were published in the 90s and early 2000s, and I would like to just briefly run through a couple of studies. One of the studies is Dr. Raghavendra's study, and the other is Dr. Banerjee's. And effects of an integrated yoga program in handling the genotoxic stress in breast cancer women who are undergoing radiation. This was one of the first. And you can see here in this, the slide here, this is, instead of having too many slides, I tried to have just a couple of slides for both the studies. So hats pre and post, this is the questionnaire on hospital anxiety and depression scores that we have. So you can see in The white, these columns are the yoga columns, and this is the control. So the pre and post. So consistently in all the post data that you see, you can see yoga group had least anxiety or depression score compared to the control group, as well as the perceived stress score. The pre and the post yoga group has definitely a very good low score compared to the control group. We also could see some of the DNA damage with pre and post, and with the radiation treatment that breast cancer patients went through. The yoga group that went through the program intervention had least DNA damage than the control group that participated in the study. This is one of the studies. The next is effects of integrative approach of yoga therapy, the program that Vyasa designs on nausea and emesis in breast cancer patients. And the study design, we had about 174 patients screened, and 98 were randomized to yoga or to control. And this study had a unique follow-up, which was pre-surgery, post-surgery, pre-radiation, post-radiation, or pre-chemotherapy as well as post-chemotherapy. And you have the other dropouts from the yoga as well as the control group cited. And what is interesting in this was the significant differences between the yoga and the control groups. The very significant things that you can really make out is the post-chemo induced nausea frequency, which is these scores in the control and the yoga group, which significantly says that yoga has a great impact, or yoga has a role to play in the not just only the quality of life and others, even in maintaining the symptoms which cancer patients has. And these symptoms for cancer patients means a lot. When they go through this treatment, it is not a simple symptom to go through, but this, in fact, indirectly or indirectly, influences the treatment options itself. So these are a couple of studies that I thought I'd just run through. And because of these studies, which were done at Bangalore, MD Anderson, Dr. Lorenzo Cohen, who is the director, took an initiative to do some of the studies at MD Anderson. And first couple of studies that were done at MD Anderson were the copies or the mirror of the studies that what happened in Bangalore. So there was a collaboration between MD Anderson and Vyasa Bangalore, and we had randomized controlled trials for women undergoing radiation, and phase 1 to 3. The phase 1 and 2 has been completed, and the phase 3 trial, or the biggest trial that we are doing, is in progress right now. So the phase 1 trial, yoga intervention group attended 2 yoga sessions per week for over 6 weeks. Each class was facilitated by a certified yoga teacher from SVYASA, and waitlist had standard of care. So whatever the treatment standard was at the hospital with the social groups and other things that happened, which was common for both the groups. It was just the standard of care for the waitlist. So the yoga program included breathing and loosening practices, what's called Sukshma Vyayama, and postures, 7 simple asanas, deep relaxation, that is the DRT practice, alternate nostril breathing, the Nadi Shuddhi Pranayama, meditation. This was the program which was used for the intervention. And the assessments were made, the baseline, that was before they could get into the program, the baseline assessments were done, taking their parameters, and they had 6 weeks of treatment, the 2 sessions for 6 weeks, and then the assessment was done 1 week post-radiation, and the next assessment was 1 month post-radiation, and the next one was 3 months. So basically this was 3 months follow-up, and also the control groups were also assessed at the same corresponding times. So the patients approached were 137. We could finally randomize about 71 patients, 30 to yoga and 31 to the control. And again, the follow-ups as I just mentioned. And some of the couple of slides that I would present to see what are the improvements that we could find is the general health well-being. So the general health for the yoga group, of course, was higher, but we could see that at T2, the general health for the yoga group had a real high impact than the control group, and also physical functioning both improved post-treatment. This is the post-treatment that you're seeing here. So post-treatment, both groups improved at the physical functioning, but yoga group had a real high score at this point at the physical functioning. So change from the baseline, this is again SF36, a questionnaire that we assess to see the physical functioning and general health and well-being. So at this, the yoga group had all the improvements, which is above, but the control group had a lot of negative improvement, or you can say the deterioration that you could see. It's not even above the baseline in this. And in this study, again, another interesting thing that we could assess, or we tried to assess, is the benefit finding and impact of the event itself. So when the cancer patients go through this, it's not just the parameters you assess, but it is a big experience for themselves to see how this actually impacted their life. So in this, you can see the impact of event, the benefit finding. Of course, yoga group had a higher benefit finding than the control group because of the the practice and the impact, and the impact of event. And here, this score that you see is actually the intrusive thoughts. So you could see the T1, that is 1 month follow-up, yoga group had increased in intrusive thoughts than the control group. And when we were discussing and assessing why is it so, that why the control group was having less intrusive thoughts than the yoga group, we could see from the trauma data that is available that for any person to understand or to adjust to the traumatic experience that they go through in their life, intrusive thoughts were more helpful, and we are associating, or we are trying to think that the association between this is directly related to the benefit finding, that at 1 month follow-up, patients had more intrusive thoughts, were also having more benefit finding from the whole experience itself. So these are some of the comments from the patients, not from one, but many patients who participated in the study, who were highly appreciative of the study. And after this phase, what was next? So after the first trial was done, we could move on to a better design because we had good experience from the first phase trial that we did. So in this, the improve or the changes that we could make is we have just a waitlist control in this, and as just now Dr. Selvan was presenting, that you do get commented that it's placebo or it's not exactly the report, the intervention that is causing the effects. So we did add a component which was stretching. So here we got into 3 groups. One is yoga, one is control, and one is active control, which is stretching. So this group did meet with the instructor for the same amount of the time that yoga people met with, and they did some stretching practices which were very beneficial for breast cancer patients who were undergoing that phase in treatment. So the number was 150 instead of 6 to 1, and 3 groups. Instead of 3 months follow-up, we moved on to 6 months, and classes, instead of 2 weeks per class, we could do a design to 3 weeks, 3 classes in a week. And for this, the funding was provided by another thing that we were just talking about, that the funding, we were funded by NIH for this and our 21 grant. And again, this was a collaboration between MD Anderson and Piazza. Inclusion criteria, breast cancer stage 0 to 3, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3 cancers. Patients were included, 18 years of age or older, who could read and speak English, no major psychiatric diagnosis or bone metastasis in their disease, and patients who had taken yoga sessions in the previous year actively. If they were active yoga practitioners, they were not included in the study, but otherwise patients were active or non-channelized deep vein thrombosis is another exclusion criteria that we had for this study. Assessment times, you could see this is almost the similar assessment design that we have, but instead of 3 months, we had another assessment point. It is at the 6 months, which is an extended assessment, and the waitlist controls were assessed at the correspondence, exactly at the corresponding times with the yoga patients. And the yoga program, breathing and joint loosening exercises, the Sukshma as we had in the first one. Postures, these were some of the postures that were, these were the exact postures that we used, and alternative nostril breathing and meditation. And outcomes assessed, subjective measures, health status and physical functioning, SF36, sleep, fatigue, benefit findings, spirituality, depression, objective measures were cortisol rhythmicity. Again, this cortisol rhythmicity is something that the Bangalore people had done, and this was again included even in this study at MD Anderson. So 178 patients randomized into 3 groups, yoga 53, 56, and 54, and the consecutive follow-up points that we see. Patient characteristics across all the 3 groups, that is yoga, stretching, as well as the waitlist that we had. We had similar patient characteristics with their age, race, education, and staging, etc. So, one of the outcomes that we have measured is fatigue. And because we had included an active group, which is stretching, we did expect that active group, which the exercises that the active group did were some of the exercises which were assigned for the breast cancer patients at that stage. So we did expect some of the good changes even in the control group when they were participating in the study. And with no doubt, here the most group which benefited was the control group, and yoga group did almost close to the stretching group, a little better. When we did the follow-up, it was a little better, but this was with the fatigue. SF36, physical functioning. From here on, that was the only area in the fatigue that yoga people did not do really well or did not do as well as the stretching. But in all the other findings that we have, yoga group has really done well than the other. So this is from the end of treatment, so this is not the baseline, from the end of treatment up to 6-month follow-up. So the stretching people were of course, were doing better than the yoga, than the waitlist, but yoga group did really, really well. And you can see the differences that between the yoga and the control group, yoga and the stretching here. So in general health overall, wherein the stretching as well as the control were at some points below the baseline, but yoga group did fairly well even here with a high levels at the 1 month and 3 month follow-up, and a slight deterioration that you start seeing at the 6 month follow-up, and this could be basically because of the practice that patients might not have kept up. Benefit finding, even here, the group of stretching and the waitlist, you can see that went below the baseline level after their 1 month follow-up. As soon as they start their treatment at the hospital and the follow-up 1 month follow-up, it was below the baseline, but yoga could retain it constantly almost at the same level that they were at compared to the other 2 groups. Cortisol, so this is again cortisol rhythmicity, is again cortisol is a stress hormone, and a couple of things that usually people measure is the amount of cortisol secretion itself as well as the cortisol slope, which you can find here. And this is a baseline slide where you can see the most blunt slope here you can see is the yoga slope. And the blunt it is, it's not good. The more steepy or the more curvy the slope is, the better it is. So at the baseline, yoga had actually most blunt, but as you go and see here, by the end of treatment, yoga has the most steepest slope, which signifies that due to the radiation, the damage that can happen with the cortisol rhythmicity is prevented or is better with the yoga group than the other 2 groups that you could see. And even at the 1 month follow-up, you can see this is even better. The steepness, the curve is deeper with the yoga group than the other 2 groups. Another important thing is people learn the intervention, participate in the intervention for about a month or 6 weeks while they go through their treatment at the radiation. But once they complete the radiation or once they complete their hospital stay, they also stop doing it. So another thing that we interestingly wanted to follow up is the attendance and their PCS's physical change score between. So these dark lines that you see is the red ones are yoga, and the dark ones are the people who attended their classes, who had highest number of classes. And these dashed lines are the people who had least number of yoga classes, even though they had opportunity to have it. So the least number of yoga classes people had is almost as equal to highest attending stretch group. So yoga, even though people say that the stretching or the exercise component is major, it's not just some exercise, but it has definitely higher difference with the normal stretching and stretch exercises that people would do. So these were phase 1 and phase 2. So right now, what's going on? From the R21 granted 150 patient study that we have, right now we have a phase 3, or one of the biggest study, which is again funded by NIH. And this was non-blinded, and another component that you can see here, this is single-blinded, meaning when patients are approached to this study, we do not say this is a yoga study, this is said this is a relaxation study, we would like you to give you some relaxation because you're undergoing this stressful experience of cancer. Only after the participants are randomized, the yoga people would know that they are in a yoga group. The other people still think that this is just a relaxation practice. So this is a single blind, and stretching and relaxation. So in the previous, you saw that the component was just stretching, the control people did just stretching practices, but here for this design, even the component of relaxation, which is guided imagery, or just lying down and letting the patients rest for 5 to 10 minutes. So the component of relaxation is again included here to see how the original designs or relaxation practices, the scriptural practices of yoga differ from just lying down or resting. So 600 participants, and instead of 6 months follow-up here, we have a 1-year follow-up, and again the design is we do have a second randomization that we do, and one of the, say, 100 patients come out of yoga group. In that, again, 50 patients could get into maintenance arm, in which the instructor calls the patient every month and sees how their practice is going on. So basically, you're motivating the patients to keep up their practice for next 1 year. So 1-year follow-up is done. Also, one of the important measures that we're trying to see is the economic outcomes, in which how, especially in a country like America, how yoga can be taken to insurance peoples or somebody, so that it can also be covered under the insurance plan to make it more into the standard of care. Some of the patient comments from the second study. And these are definitely different patients, but even though we see a substantial amount of data that we analyze and publicize, it means more to the patients and their experience and their participation in the study. These are some of the patient comments which I probably should be sharing. Thank you.
So we just managed to finish on time in 15 minutes. So if everybody's okay, spend another 10 minutes here, so we can probably entertain a couple of questions for each speaker. Okay, so should we go from the back, start with Smita, and then come back to
in terms of your trial with the stages 0 to 3, how are you going to classify the staging? This is a big range. And how do you assess, the stage 3 patients and the 2 people? And how are you going to control the
Because we have radiologists and other people who are involved, and the screening is something that we do, but despite of that, we are now able to fit in the big range of patients into classes and assessments. But I think we would we would get that feel once we go to, because this is a new study and we have started just last year. By the end of 1 year's follow-up or so, we might feel that difficulties of stage 3 follow-ups with those patients and things like that.
In fact, regarding the stretching control, sorry, one more question. We did discuss about our trial. The problem is, since we are the first trial, we want to show the proof of principle the yoga people are doing very well. Maybe next trial we will include the stretching or other regular activities, permanently. That's a very good point. In fact, we did consider that.
in terms of one is the staging, so in terms of the type of breast cancer, you said it is for that, like there is a metastasis, so it's all receptive and non-receptive. Okay. Any other questions?
I had a
quick question. So it seemed like there were a few dropouts from the study. Like, what kind of drop off do you expect as you do it? And then, are you going to do an intention to treat analysis at the end, or?
We do, and I think some of the dropouts that we see right now is people who, like at MD Anderson, the research that we carry on, we have a lot of patients who come from out of state for the treatment because MD Anderson is one of the reputed cancer centers, and the patients from out of state is, one of the difficulties to follow them up because, of the distance or to come all the way from a different state just for a, appointment and things like that. And I think it could be various reasons, and definitely we would do an analysis of the reasons.
So, any questions for Dr. Selvan? IBS?
Not really questions because we got any research.
Data. No funding questions, no community questions.
What was the rationale for the types of heart rate variability tests that you proposed in the protocol? They're a little bit unusual compared to most studies.
Oh, the heart rate variability, as we know that, suppose you're going through the some math test, for example.
I know the protocol.
Oh, okay.
I understood what
Okay.
they're doing.
Okay.
Trying to find out why. Because you're not using typical heart rate variability analysis procedures that most people have used for evaluation of sympathetic, parasympathetic drive. You have a collaborator who suggested those particular tests?
Also suggested, I think Dr. Aratna suggested this cooperative. And other than that, there is going to be a potential variation very early. Other than that, I don't know.
You might want to find a collaborator at Thomas Jefferson who's done some heart rate variability work so that you have a little bit more expertise on board for that.
Sure. I think that's a good solution.
There are, I think, one or two studies earlier. And one of the primary outcome variable was narrative histogram. It's interesting. That study was done really. We explore EGG.
Yes, we did discuss that. The problem is doing that. Let's be some of the things.
It's not tough because there are two ways. One is invasive and the other one is surface EGG.
Yeah.
Surface EGG is really acceptable. Yeah, something to consider.
Any other questions for Dr. Selvan? Questions for Dr. Naveen? Or is not long enough, so you may want to speak louder or you can come.
I can speak now.
I just have a question for Dr. Naveen. I saw a couple of slides and they were dated back in like late 80s or early 90s and all that. So do you have newer technology to proceed all this research or you are still...
You saw the references from 95 to 27. So we started off, I started off saying that, these studies, this was a grand overview of Shirley's MPhil days to now that we are doing 200 projects on this meditation, this type of meditation. So this was an attempt to give, because lots and lots of people who are trained in Vyasa here or back home do practice home meditation and cyclic meditation. These are two flagship techniques that are taught and practiced by Vyasa community. So they wanted to know what have we done until now with meditation on home. So which is why we really wanted to keep it. The more recent variables are, of course, ego potentials and neuroimaging. Now now we are doing high density EEG for 28 channels with while people are in the scanner, and not at baseline meditation, but while they're performing some of the cognitive tasks.
Any other questions for Dr. Naveen? So my question is, that the heart rate, decrease in heart rate. So what discriminates the decrease in heart rate with home meditation versus regular yoga time? I mean, so the standard we learn to realize in things like that with yoga was exercise, one increases the heart rate, the other one decreases the heart rate, the other one and so on. So between home meditation and just your standard asana practice, is there anything?
You wouldn't see probably consistent increase in heart rate faster, for example, but you would see guided enough. You would see some in pranayama, which we have also seen in our studies on relaxation techniques and pranayama. It was similar to meditation, like a home or something like that. But obviously, the moment you bring in body work faster, you will see.
And one last thing is for all of you who are propagating clinical research here, do you have any suggestions, thoughts for how one can get started in other areas? You have successful research grant at MD Anderson, so you are getting there eventually. And you have lots of fun from India. I mean, India is different, so I'm talking about the US thing. So if you have any thoughts to share for a couple of minutes,
my suggestion is based on my other experiences. Even if you do case studies, see, if you look at even a population here, each one of us is different. It's okay to do case study, but accumulate data. Suppose take one particular individual, accumulate data, knowledge, and that is important. And years of work, and then showing each patient. You can get series of case studies you can compile, and then you can make a publication. That will give a good thing. Not just I feel good and all the things. It's not going to help. You have to go and demonstrate. Suppose you're dealing with hypertension patients. How many times you follow up with them, measuring your blood pressure and many other components. Even individual patient. If you do that, then it will be good. I shared with you one patient I followed 8 years. How much amount of data I have, voluminous. And that is what made us, one case, I made a publication, very good publication, because only one patient. But you have to collect a lot of information. If you don't collect information, it's not going to be helpful.
and you need institutions.
I think for case studies, you don't need to have IRB approval or anything. Case studies, if the individual patient can give a waiver, that's what I did. I don't need to go to the institution approval or anything. And the patient you then you can accumulate, but you cannot identify them as name, but you can collect information. And that is the information I can share with you. In this kind of trial, you have to go to the institution approval. It's a lot of review. It's been we have started 2.5 years ago. It's a lot of labor, a lot of things we need to, especially conducting clinical trials. It's tough here. And why we selected some of the parameters. We are thinking of some invasive parameters, blood parameters, I want to do, but I didn't want to go to it because feasibility.
I have a few points to comments on that. One, in fact, some time ago, I think 2005 or 7, I've forgotten, Dr. Shirley and we all thought that we have passed a stage in yoga research. That's how the theme then was, yoga works, but how? I think now we are entering to a stage where we also saw that in most of the presentations today, that it's time to explore underlying mechanisms of these health benefits that we see, either for wellness or healing. So that's one. For those of us who want to get into yoga research, really have to incorporate some exploring underlying mechanisms. For beginners, this is a game that very often when Dr. Shirley and I go around other yoga institutions in India, we ask people to dig into their old data, so retrospective analysis. So unlike here, in fact, more of population-based studies or epidemiological data on how many people learn, what kind of patients choose yoga, what are the camp strategies. These kind of questions are answered here, but in India, we really don't have that kind of data. So, but there are other components that can be explored here in terms of lifestyle strategies or the compliance, economic outcomes. So these are some of the things that can be done with no money virtually. If you have some of the volunteers, or and I'm told here that for NIH grant you really have to do some work, generate some pilot data. So you can get started. Particularly now, Yoga Bharati. I've interacted with 2-3 branches of Yoga Bharati. You have large number of teachers trained. As part of YSC, you do a lot of teaching. As part of teachers therapy, teachers training, each one is expected to do more than 50 cases. So like Dr. Selvan said, so there's something that there's always this room to get started with virtually no money or no designated lab. Again, this is a favorite thing that Dr. Shirley would have said in one of our presentations. Today I would like to say, when she came in '92, leaving an established neurophysiology lab from Nimhans to Prashanti, the fund given to her was 5,000 rupees. So even today she believes, and we're all kind of oriented to the fact that you really don't need big money to do good quality research. Yes, at a stage where we really want to explain underlying mechanisms, yes, we want to do molecular biology, neuroimaging, so on and so forth. But for those of us who are here in this conference, want to get started, it's a lot of fun.
And I think you alluded to biomarkers, that's really found out in all the neurodegenerative diseases. So,
Thank you.
thank you for the excellent session.